past few weeks, we've been talking about tug of war, kind of using the game of tug of war as a symbol of life. And you get this. You play tug of war every day of your life. Your parents are tugging you this direction. Your friends are tugging you that direction. Your coach is tugging you over here. Your teachers are tugging you over here. And often, you want to be a kind of person like spiritually. You want to be over here, but there's all these other people and forces like pulling you in a different direction. So I just want to ask a simple question, because you probably by looking at me, you realize this. I was never asked to be the anchor of anyone's tug of war team. So I don't know a lot about tug of war, so I actually Googled the ways of winning tug of war. I was stunned. Did you realize there's actually a National Tug of War Association? Who would have thought? And there's these rules that if you maybe are not as strong as the other team, if you're smarter than the other team, you can still win at the game of tug of war. So I thought it'd be kind of cool, because some of us, let's just be honest, we're not as strong as other people physically, mentally, spiritually, and you can still win the game of tug of war if you're smarter, even if someone else is stronger. So I'll just share with you the 5 rules if you want to win at the game of tug of war. Here are 5 things that you can do to increase your chances. Number 1, you got your strongest player. Do you put him at the front or do you put him at the back? The answer is you put him at the back. Because in some games, they allow you to wrap the rope around you, and that gives you the greatest advantage for the person at the very back. So put your strongest player at the back. Second strongest player, where do you put them? Actually, you put them at the very front. Because if you're in the front and you're the strongest player, you can intimidate the other team. And as they lunge you forward towards the line, you can just like give it all you got and pull back. So strongest at the back, second strongest at the front. Everyone in between should alternate between stronger, weaker, stronger, weaker, stronger, weaker. Because if you put 3 people who are weaker together, their weakness will rub off on each other. But if you put a strong person next to a weak person, it's the strength of the stronger that rubs off on the weaker in the game of tug of war. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, you don't win with your arms, you win with your feet. Because in tug of war, it's not the pulling of the rope that gives you the greatest advantage. It's actually pushing with your feet against the rope that gives you your greatest advantage. So you win with your feet. Therefore, when you get set, you want to put your feet, whether you're like some people will put the rope right in between them and pull this way, or sometimes they'll put one foot in front of the other. Doesn't really matter if you're straight on or turned. You want your feet slightly wider than your shoulders. And then you want to make sure, this is most important, when the gun goes off, your feet are already set. Because if you're not set, they're going to jerk the rope right out of your hand. So get set. Rule number 3 is that you take small steps when you're pulling the rope. Like during the course of the tug of war, you're going to have advantage. You're going to go back and forth, back and forth. When you are getting momentum, your temptation is to take one huge step back to capture the momentum. But what you don't realize is it's going to go back forward, and now you're off balance. So take baby steps, just little baby steps. You push with your legs, and then when you get a little slack, you take a little step, bend your legs, push with your legs, baby step, and make progress that way. Number 4, and this is related, you want to pull all together at the same time, because if you just all are pulling like at your own pace, it's going to be a consistent pressure against the other team. But if you can push with your legs together, take a small step, push with your legs together, it actually catches the other team off guard. Rule number 5, the other team is going to do to you what you just did to them. So when they are getting momentum, you don't pull with your arms. That's your like instincts. I'm going to use my strength, and I'm just going to grit it out. What you actually do, if you watch, you when they get momentum, you bend your knees and lean back and push with your legs back to fight the other team. That's how you win at tug of war. That's also how you win in a spiritual game of tug of war. You might think, that has nothing to do with like the Bible or church. It actually has some really interesting insights. I'm going to read a few verses from Colossians chapter 4. And in each of these verses is one of these rules for how to win when someone is trying to pull you where you don't want to go. Verse 2, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. Rule number 1, do you remember it? Put your strongest person at the back. When you forget about God in this game of tug of war at life, whether it's with your parents or your friends or your culture, you try to do it on your own, you will lose. But when you have God as your anchor, by praying to God, you remember, hey, God's behind me. God's got this. God is strong enough to pull the whole line forward. When you put God at the back as your anchor in prayer, you have a better chance of winning. But you also want to put the second strongest person at the very front of the line. At the same time, this is the Apostle Paul, he says, pray also for us that God may open to us a door for the word, to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison. Paul's a fascinating person to me. He's worth a look if you're interested in this kind of history. He was a powerhouse for the gospel. The guy was in prison for preaching, and yet, listen, he doesn't ask for the door to the prison to be open. He asked for the door of opportunity to preach to be open. In fact, Paul preached to more people in prison than when he was out of prison. The lesson here is that if you want to win at this game of tug of war, you don't want people to move you. You want to move them. You should have God at your back and a hero in front of you. Someone who has gone before, who has fought the good fight, who has run the race, who finished the course, who has won in his stance for Jesus Christ. And for you, maybe that's a parent. Good for you. But if it's not a parent, maybe it's a coach. If not a coach, maybe it's your student pastor. If it's not one of them, maybe it's a preacher that you know. Some spiritual hero, perhaps an upperclassman, who has already stood faithfully for Jesus Christ. Make sure you keep them in front of you. And next to you, your friends are really critically important. You want someone who is stronger than you on your right and stronger than you on your left if you're weak. If you feel like you're strong, maybe you could stay next to someone who is just now getting into the faith or just now trying to take a stand. But one of the rules for winning at tug of war is the same rule for winning at life. You need God at your back, a hero in front of you, and people around you that you can encourage and they can encourage you. Rule number 2, you win with your feet, not with your hands. I want to read verse 5. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Sometimes we think that we're going to win in this tug of war by arguing with other people your position, or preaching the gospel on a platform in the street, or maybe getting into a debate with one of your friends about the existence of God. That's not how you win at this tug of war. You win with your feet, not with your words, not with your hands, with your feet. It's the way you live your life with consistency, with patience, with discipline, that will gain you more ground in this tug of war of life. In fact, that also relates to number 3, take small steps. Verse 6 says this, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt. Now let me ask a question. Do you open up the lid of salt and just pour it on your food? No, it's just a little dash here and a little dash there. When you do speak about God or stand up for God, you don't need to blast someone with everything you know. In fact, this is good because if you don't know a lot or you don't have all the answers, you don't need this sophisticated sermon. You just need a little salt here, a little salt there. Maybe it's the way you pray for someone. Maybe it's the way you just talk about your thankfulness for the church. Maybe it's the way you just throw in something you learned from reading a verse of Scripture. It's just simple, small steps. Baby steps will ultimately move you farther in the direction that you want to go. Number 5, and this is related, pull together. If you're trying on your own to win a game of tug of war with culture or with your family or with a coach, it's not going to happen. But when you surround yourself with other people and you are aligned, pulling together, you will have way more strength than when you do it on your own. I think you already know that. And number 5, you have to absorb the blows with your legs. When they start gaining momentum and you feel yourself lunging in a direction that you don't want to go, whatever that direction is, maybe it's a sexual temptation, or maybe it's with your language, or maybe it's with some of the habits that you're getting into. When you feel yourself lunging in a direction you don't want to go, you just kind of got to bend your knees and push back with your feet. What are your feet? Well, verse 5, it's the way you walk. It's your consistency in reading your Bible. It's your consistency in treating people with kindness. It's in your consistency of not being judgmental with other people. The way you live your life is your most compelling argument for Jesus Christ. It says at the very end, so that you want to speak with seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. I want you to be really careful with this. Because when we read a verse like that, we think, well, I got to have all the answers. No, you don't. Well, I got to be really smart. No, you don't. Like, I got to know all the verses in the Bible. No, you don't. It is your lifestyle of patience, thankfulness, and gentleness that is your most compelling argument. It is not, when Paul talks about giving an answer, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And with you talk with your feet first, what comes out of your mouth will be more convincing. So how are we going to put this into practice? We're going to break up into groups right now. And you're going to talk with your coaches and other students that are in your group. And here's what I'm guessing will happen. The coaches, because they've gone before you, have a little bit of wisdom in life. But what I believe is that you're smart enough that you can actually figure out ways of putting into practice these 5 rules in your context even better than your coach. So this discussion isn't about somebody sitting and giving you great information. It's about you brainstorming together how you can pull on a rope to make sure you go in the direction of life that you want to go and not the direction someone else is pulling you to go. God bless as you have this discussion.